to this computer. All right.
Hey,
Howdy.
how are you? All right, so
Uh,
today we're talking a little bit about negotiating salaries as a CRNA. We're talking a little bit about just the compensation landscape. This is coming from a conversation you and I have been having about a study that we just did about what the current benchmarks for CRNA salaries are throughout the US. And less so where CRNAs should be starting when they're thinking about their salary, more so where the people who are making CRNA offers are starting when they're looking at CRNA salaries. So what is the available data is what we looked at. When I first started LOCUM, which for those who don't know, is a matchmaking engine for CRNA jobs. We first focused just on 1099 work, just on locum tenens, and started to see that across the market, there's really a huge demand for even just visibility into the job market, where the jobs are, who's hiring, where, and getting those jobs in front of CRNAs in a way that's easy, not intrusive, and still gives them value outside of just getting a job, right? So, and I believe it was, yeah, we started around May of this year. We were lucky enough to be accepted into the Google for Startups Accelerator, meaning that Google has a focus on helping companies who are exploring AI in their company, their applications, and really leveraging their tools to do the thing that they're trying to do. And what was the thing that we were trying to do? CRNAs told us that their two biggest pain points when it comes to the job market is credentialing and then figuring out how to negotiate a salary or even what their salary should be. And so we were really curious about that. So on one hand, we made a credentialing wallet to help CRNAs keep all their stuff in place. And then on the other hand, we were like, well, what are we going to do about providing some visibility and some transparency into CRNA pay? While we were in the program, we were lucky enough to get a machine learning mentor. We got access to various professionals in the Google directory. And then at the same time, we were conducting an internal sort of like pay trends survey. What we noticed is that salary offers, actual reported salary, and even available data from the US government, they're all saying various
it's
things.
all over the place. Yeah,
It's all over
absolutely.
the place. And the amount of variability was shocking because we had a lot of data. Like we had a ton of data from gas work. We originally got almost 24,000 rows, whittled it down all the way down to 4,000 rows that had enough data that we could actually analyze. And there were two things that we wanted to do. Number one, we wanted to put all the resources and for CRNA salary benchmarking in one place for CRNAs to access. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, the gas work data that we had, the ANA compensation survey, and then we did an internal 1099 survey, almost 700 CRNAs. That was the number one goal. Number two goal was for us to let's see if we can build a salary calculator. Is it possible that you as a CRNA could go, look at a particular job offer or be offered something and say, given these variables, right? So my location, the amount of call I'm planning to take, the benefits that they're offering me, this is around where that salary ballpark should be. And when we did that, at the end of these 8 weeks, it ended up being more like 12 weeks. The salary calculator that we built, when it was accurate, would be accurate within like about 95% of the actual salary the CRNA would make. So very close in terms of prediction, but it was only right half the time. And the reason it was only right half the time is because there's so much that goes into a CRNA salary. There's so much more than just the pay that's exchanged. It's the scheduling, the acuity of the cases, so many different factors that influenced it. So that's what we're trying to now be
And
able to quantify.
and that's also kind of what we're going to talk about with the negotiation, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's more than just the one aspect of pay,
Yeah.
right?
And I think that's
Exactly.
where CRNAs struggle. So when a CRNA is telling you, how do you really negotiate? They're not asking, how do you split the difference between an offer of 250 and 200? Most people can manage to do that by themselves. What doesn't exist is an actual way to quantify all the different variables that go into a salary. And when the employer is making that offer, they're considering their, sort of organizational needs. And most CRNAs aren't even aware of what those things are.
Well, and the other half of the CRNAs are saying, well, I'm going to Chris Voss and say, never split the difference. I want exactly this. And,
Yeah. And which
how
is
do
really
I get
interesting,
exactly this?
which is really interesting because the negotiation tips that I have and I've been discussing with people that I've been helping are from the book Never Split the Difference. He
That
talks
and,
about way
Tim
more than just,
Ferriss, all the best negotiators, they say, well, there are different routes to
yeah,
get there,
yeah.
but there are kind of certain ways that you need to talk about those.
And
Just a
not
few of the
just certain
tips.
ways, but also just like a basic understanding of what the actual industry trends are, the compensation
Hmm.
benchmarks, what are the prevailing conditions. And for me, when I came out of school, and even in the first like few years of my career, to be completely honest, had no idea how to do that benchmarking. When I talk to employers and I ask them, how are you making offers? Like, where do you go to figure out, okay, like a CRNA in a certain market should be making this much? Usually it's word of mouth, or they benchmark through ANA compensation data, or they look on gas work to see what other people are offering CRNAs. But we know that the salary that's offered a CRNA and the salary that they end up taking sometimes can be different within like a few percentage points, not anything insane. But I think the conclusion is that most people are guessing when they're trying to figure out what a CRNA either is making or should be making, what to offer them. And even a CRNA that's negotiating for themselves, there's a lot of guessing that's going on. A machine that had thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of data could only be right half the time. And I
Well,
think that's a lot.
and honestly, the employer knows within reason where they should be, unless
Right,
they are truly trying to undercut the market. And there
right,
are a few employer types that are trying to undercut the market, and it's usually one um, salary person that's on a level that's trying to undercut, and then there's the normal uh, accounting person that knows exactly where they should be. So that person, if they're trying to undercut, they're not going to be in that position very long because they're not going to be hiring people. And
yeah,
so they're
one
not
of
going to
the
be in that
things,
position very long because they're not getting the coverage that they need, and or they're not
right,
getting good coverage, and
right.
they're not going to be there very long.
And they may be kind of going from what the CRNAs they have on their full-time staff are making currently and not maybe having visibility into what CRNAs outside of their organization are making in the same area or what
Right.
they're expecting. So we actually found that about 10% of the difference between what a CRNA expects to be offered and what they're actually getting offered right now. Which 10% in our salaries is a pretty huge difference, right? Like if you're going
Hmm.
to be making close to even let's say in the middle of the road around like 250K for certain types of jobs, that's a $25,000 difference in
Uh-huh.
what you're being offered and what you think you should be making. And I think that for sure that confirms what I've experienced just running a marketplace the last several months is there's a huge discrepancy between both sides. And so that's where this kind of started. It was like, well, how do we start to get some visibility into actually what's happening and what's accurate?
Yep. Outstanding.
Yeah. So in terms of negotiation, we said we wouldn't be too long-winded
Right.
on this. I know
So
you've had a lot
there's
more experience doing this than I have. So how do you approach it? What's your secret sauce for getting what you want out of a deal?
So we looked into, a couple of those tips, and so we looked at the Chris Voss and the Telros, and you kind of helped us put this lovely graphic together. And it also I looked at the Tim Ferriss, and so you have Chris Voss and Telros here,
Yeah.
um, and so we have the understand the landscape, which is perfect, and that kind of
Yeah.
ties in with your
Yeah. Do you have it
survey
with you,
perfectly.
John? Do you want to share your screen or let me share mine?
You can share your screen. That'd be perfect.
It says it's
Let's
disabled
see.
on here. Let's see.
I am here and share multiple persistent and share. You are screen sharing. Oh, well, okay. Let's see. This is what we want to share. Open the preview. I don't even know if I'm sharing. Is this sharing?
Yeah, yeah, it's sharing. You could probably make it a little bigger so we don't see the rest of your screen.
There. How's that?
That's perfect. That's awesome. Okay, so
All
I'm
right.
on my end
So
too, my second
in
screen.
in going through this, I think it's really important that we kind of, understand the landscape, which is great. But when we're talking to them, this is just kind of going through the back of our head. So when we're talking to them, we need to know kind of where the recruiter's coming from and, have you know, is this an area that they're looking specifically for, or are you for the first time talking to a recruiter and just, saying, "Oh, well, I have 16 licenses and I'm just looking to go anywhere." So you need to also have an idea of where you're looking to go and what type of practice you're going for. You can't just say I'm looking for anything and everything.
Right.
So, the first
Absolutely.
the first person you need to be thinking about is you and your career goals, and then, you need to open it up and then talk to the recruiter, and the recruiter needs to come back with, this is what I'm looking for. These are the goals of this agency. We have this hot fill is in this position. It's in the middle of Kansas. It's going to be a solo position. We need this filled immediately. This is something that's urgent, and you're getting clues here. This is an urgent fill. This is something that we need right away. You have a license here. This is something that we need to get credentialed. If you can get these things and these ideas, you're getting a sense that, okay, they are going to be more willing to pay a little bit more. They're going to have, um, it's a solo position, so you're going to have more responsibility. You're going to have more call. You're going to have call back. You're going to have, you know, more um, full coverage for the hospital. You're going to probably have the ER calling you. You may
Yep.
have
I see you call
different people.
you. Yep.
Well, and if not, it's going to be different people in the hospital, the baby that needs an IV, or, those other phone calls that you just get because you're the only provider in the town.
Yeah.
So these are things that kind of go through the back of
Yeah.
your head, and you say, okay, and then, the next thing on this graphic is to practice the empathy. Well, I understand that you are needing these things. How else can I be helpful to you? What is the best thing that I can do to help you get this filled?
Yeah.
What other things are you looking for? So you're always trying to clarify the best things for them and make sure that you're a good fit for this role.
Right.
Because, if you can say, it sounds like you're looking for this. Well, I have this experience. These are the things that I come to the table with.
Right.
And so
Right.
you're saying, okay, well, I really do fit this position. Now, when you're saying I fit this position and these things sound good, now you say, well, what are you looking to? Uh, you want to ask them, okay, so it sounds like this may be a good fit. What is your rate, and what are the terms of the contract that you're looking to um, pay, and what are the inclusives or non-inclusives here? What is the hotel? If there's not a hotel, what is the housing for this? How long is the contract? Does this fit in with my family? Is my whole family going? Are my dogs going? Is this
Yeah.
something that I'm just going for myself? Is this a 1 week thing? Because if this is a
Yeah.
1 week, I'm not going to drag everybody there. I'm not going to come back. It's not even worth going and credentialing for, it's going to take me 4 weeks and all that paperwork to go for 1 week. It's not work. I mean, that
I
that
mean,
doesn't fit with my goals and my priorities. Okay.
right.
So we have to know kind of where things fit. So this is, that's all part of the understanding where they are and what their goals are and what your goals are. So,
Yeah.
when you're getting all of that, so that's part of that. So you get that information, you say, okay, so where are you pay wise and where are you benefit wise? You say, is that the best that you can do? Because, and just kind of sit there, and let them kind of say, eh, that's the middle of Kansas. I'm used to being in Boston, or I'm used to being in Chicago. I This was not where I was planning to spend my summer. This is not where I was planning to ski this season.
Yeah.
So, you know, kind of when you sit there and you say, hmm, let them negotiate against themselves. Don't negotiate against yourself. First, let them think, maybe I shouldn't have given that answer. And so let them be thinking against themselves and just kind of take a step back. Don't be aggressive and say, "Oh, that's horrible," or "Oh, that's an insult," or "That's terrible."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the LOCUM map is great because they put out that first word. Now, LOCUM map, obviously, hospitals and recruiters, they're not going to give you the top line. They're not going to give you the best we can always do. But that's is starting. And
Yeah.
that's exactly where I'm saying is you need to get that first offer. You need to get that first start and say,
Yeah.
it
So
sounds like you really needed somebody with a lot of experience. We're bringing a lot of experience. We're bringing a lot of these things that really match what you are needing. Now, I understand that you're needing all of these things, and I'm happy to bring it to you, and I want to get your position filled. And I think that we can do that, but this pay and benefits that I'm hearing don't match up with where I'd like to be. So
right.
if I can bring you this and I can get you here, is there a way that, you know, I'm used to the pay being here, or, you know, the pay, it's a little low, but I think if we can work on, the benefits here, here, and here, maybe we can bring these up, and that would suffice to make the pay offset. If my call was at this rate and my per diem, a lot of people don't think about the per diem being as part of your hourly, but getting 30, 45, or $60 a day when you work an 8 hour a day, that's an extra 5, 6, or $10 an hour just for breathing for the day, especially if you get sent home early and or well, when you work late, it actually lowers your hourly. But if you're working an 8 hour a day or less, then that increases your hourly pay just for being there. And I know it's supposed to offset food or otherwise, but especially at small hospitals that usually um, give you your meal or extras and you don't have to pay for those things, that's just an extra. And that's extra on top of your pay. So that's a nice little negotiation thing that you can increase your per diem without actually modifying your hourly pay. And that's a way to, it's all 1099 pay. So it doesn't, it all works into what your hourly would be. So unless they're actually saying we're only going to reimburse for a receipt, then it's all part of your 1099 pay. So what I would say is you're not just negotiating on your hourly rate. You need to be negotiating on each little thing. So instead of saying, I have to be at 250 an hour, because that's probably going to be an immediate kill and they're going to turn off their brain and they're not going to come back and have a good conversation. The best thing is to be here's how I can help, and here's how I think we're a great
So
fit.
I think the thing that most is important to me for people to understand is when you're talking to somebody who does negotiate salaries all the time and they either have more experience than you or more knowledge of just the business of anesthesia, it's very easy right off the bat to reveal that you don't know how things work. And
Oh, well,
that's
and yeah.
sort of one of the things that puts a negotiation conversation kind of starting off on the wrong foot, right? Like I think the goal that I have when someone's looking at these 6 tips isn't specifically here's how you get better hourly pay over call benefits or better call benefits over hourly pay. My goal is for people to look at this and just have a good starting point for how to even approach a conversation, right? Like you can get into the details of every single part of every particular type of job, whether it's a W-2 job, whether it's a 1099 job, every single one of these tips still applies. And that's just sort of like the general knowledge that I want people to gain from this is here are 6 things to always have in the back of your mind when you're starting these conversations and how to approach a negotiating conversation with someone. And besides that, there are a lot of CRNAs that will get taken advantage of just because they don't know even
Right.
how to start or even how to think about a conversation like this. And they're afraid to be confrontational or they're afraid to say, like, here's where I am. Like, it's not just the CRNAs that are saying, I'm starting off, at this really high number and it's non-negotiable. It's also CRNAs who are going out there and they're kind of lowballing themselves or negotiating against themselves, like you said. But just having a framework for approaching a conversation about negotiation is what I'm looking for people to be able to gain from this. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's just good to, know that, you don't want to be that person that just says, oh, okay, I'll take whatever they give me. Because every time you're talking to somebody about pay, it is a negotiation. You should be able to discuss back and forth a contract. A contract is a negotiation. It is something that you are agreeing to. Now, if you just take it, you have negotiated yourself to what they want.
Yeah.
It's your decision to do that. Now, if it's a good decision for you, then that's great. But you have to realize that, later you chose that. That is your business and your business decision to do that. And other people may have decided to negotiate or discuss differently. And your decision and your negotiation is not somebody else's negotiation. And everyone does differently. And so if there are different locums and different agencies and different groups, you are not held to the exact same standard, and your business is not their business. And unfortunately, that does not mean that you are getting the exact same as somebody else. And locums do not tend to understand that either. So,
Well, I think we all sitting here and experiencing the sort of like gap that there is between coming out of school as a clinician and really understanding the value we bring to businesses and how that sort of plays in a larger market. So I'm going to always go back to the first box here that says understanding the landscape is key. A lot
mhm.
of us skip over that completely because it's numbers and it's, complicated stuff and it doesn't get to the root of what am I taking home as quickly as we would like for it to. But like
Yeah.
this is where I think people either really excel or really fail is do you understand the actual landscape that you're negotiating in? Can the person you're even talking to negotiate? Do they even have any breathing room in that rate they're offering? How, how do you even find that out? What are the questions that you ask? So Like, do you have that direct contract? Are you being paid for this out of the regular employment budget, or are you getting paid for this out of the temporary emergency, like locums budget for you to
Right.
know, is there any room? Is there any wiggle room? Because there are some times where there's no wiggle room, and it becomes a question of, is this person trying to lowball me, or is this person trying to like harm me, or do they not have respect for me as a professional, which I hear people say a lot. And
Mm.
I think it just does really expose that a lot of us have no idea how the anesthesia business works and how the person who's offering the job, um, like what sort of like things they're looking at, and what circumstances that they're in. So really understanding those key players and how they're benchmarking, and also what buckets of money the offer that you're getting is coming from, is key.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just a matter of like we're having a conversation where you're trying to get me to take an offer and I'm trying to get you to come up to where I am. I think it's, you're a business and I'm a business. Let's clarify our goals, right? So as an independent contractor, as a W-2 CRNA, here's my business and my goals. I want to go home at 3 p.m. or I want to make this certain dollar amount, or I don't want to have to schedule my vacation in advance for a year. Whatever those goals are, the other party has goals too. Okay, my goal is
Right.
coverage for this role. Applying for a permanent job and telling them, oh, I can cover you on Tuesdays isn't going to work, because their goal isn't to just have anyone. Their goal is a permanent position. If you can be clear on that in the beginning, you can save yourself a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Absolutely.
Practicing
And
tactical empathy doesn't mean getting bulldozed. It means, hey, I understand that your goal is to fill this permanent position, but I'm a CRNA who just wants a temporary role right now. So maybe we aren't a good fit for each other, but hey, I know someone who might be a good fit for the role and I'll refer you. And maybe at some point in the future, when they do have something that fits you better, like you've developed now a relationship where you can go back to that person and do a different negotiation at a different time. Or is
ab
it, like they have a longer term goal that they want to fill this position permanent, but they're willing to bring you on temporary to kind of like get that started. As long as you both understand that the goal is eventually for you to join that team permanently, at that point, like you're sort of speaking the same language instead of two different people coming from completely separate perspectives, not really being aligned on goals, not really knowing what's going on behind the scenes of that conversation. And then people end up disappointed
hmm
at the end of the day. And that's what I would hope to help people prevent, is just how do you get to the root of what everybody's even talking about during those conversations and cut through the BS of um really what I think tends to be just unfamiliarity, um, that causes a lack of clarity and a lack of alignment between people when they're negotiating, which is why
Absolutely.
information is key, very important. Like, ask questions. Don't make statements about all the things you want. Don't start there. Ask questions. Okay, are you trying to fill this role now, or do you have a little wiggle room in time? Um, are you just kind of short, or how are you handling the shortage now? Oh, we're using a lot of locums. That gives you information into the fact that there even is a separate bucket. And then it gives you the ability to say, okay, do I want to kind of be limited to only being able to take a role where the pool of money that goes towards this resource, which is me, is limited, and I can't negotiate a locums rate for this role because I'm not meant to be a locums, I'm meant to be a permanent CRNA? Or is it something where I'm talking to someone who is meant to staff this temporarily and we're having that conversation about locums, and I know that there's a different budget for that, and I can sort of be a little bit more free in what I'm asking for? If I'm taking the locums job, am I doing it so I can be locums for a year? Sometimes you can look out and find a place that can't find permanent staff, and they're staffing out of a locums budget for a really long time. But if they're only going to contract you for 90 days and you're hoping to stay there for a year, don't set yourself up to be disappointed if at the end of that 90 days, like, it's time to go. And if you do want to negotiate a permanent role after the 90 days, it might not be at the same rate that you were able to negotiate when you were talking about the locums role.
Right.
So that's what a lot of us don't think about, I think, and don't have even just like the basis to be able to start to ask those types of questions. Yeah,
And you know, as kind of a wrap up to this, I would say, even if after all of this you aren't getting what you want and they don't seem to be getting, on your page, or you're not getting on their page, that's fine. You don't have to, always mesh. You don't always have to get
right,
there. But I would say in 99% of cases, don't burn the bridge.
right,
Our community is too small to burn too many boats. Because
right.
if you burn the bridges and burn the boats each time, you can do that once or twice in your career and probably not get burned too badly. But if you do it over and over and over, your name gets around very quickly and it can be a bad thing,
Right.
fairly quick. So
Yeah,
just I would warn anybody, between social media and, just how you handle yourself in general, um, social media and at practices, do your
right.
very best to not burn and not be the, I guess I'll say, negative Nancy all the time. Go
Yeah, I
in
think
with
some
a
people,
happy attitude, go in with
yeah,
the positivity, and do the best you can as a locum or as a provider, and um try
yeah.
not to burn those bridges
One of
if
the
you can help
biggest
it.
tips in this area is, don't ever enter a negotiation that you're not able or willing to walk away from. I think knowing that if it's not the right fit for you, that you're willing to walk away prevents you from sort of being emotional about the whole situation. I do see a lot of CRNAs who will get an offer and they become very, very emotional about what that means in terms of their value, or like, you're not valuing me as a provider. And some, it's not a lot, but some do tend to take it very personally, and in defense of themselves or defense of ourselves, sometimes we don't do a great job of towing the line between assertiveness and really just like being offensive to people.
Yeah, and professionalism. So
And
you can
professionalism is a
turn
huge
a
thing.
position down and or
Right.
politely and politically correctly say that's not
That's not
going to
going to
work
work for
for
me.
me,
Yeah,
and
that's not
I'm
going to work
going
for
to
me. I
walk
wish you the
away,
best.
or I'm
Yeah,
going to say this is not this is not
yeah,
for me at this time.
right.
And
Or
that's
hey,
completely fine.
if anything changes and you feel like you can meet me, at a better place, I'm happy to have this conversation again. But for right now, this just isn't a good fit for what I'm looking for.
And
That's enough.
that's where you leave it. And
Yeah,
maybe they will come back, maybe they won't,
maybe they won't.
but
Yeah,
that's okay. You know,
yeah.
I,
So,
I think that's kind of where we leave it for today. But
yeah,
I think this is a great conversation. This is a little longer than we expected to go,
yeah, for
but
sure. But it's an interesting topic, and it tends to get that way. It's one of the things that I think that, isn't built into most CRNA school curriculums. And so we
right.
do have to sort of like learn it out there in the wild. So I'm hoping, this gets around and, people can use it to their benefit. There's a few other graphics that I have along these lines. Let's see. I don't know if this will let me share my screen, so that if anybody would find those helpful and want me to
It's just like Vincent and I doing this the locum. Uh, I don't. I think it's locum academy is kind of what we're calling it, but you know,
yeah, let me know if you can see my
there
screen.
you go. I can see it now, so that's great.
Awesome. So, let's show you. So, this little graphic that we were just going over in this call, what you saw was page 4, which is where you get to the negotiating tips. But there are three other pages associated with this that I'll actually be going over at the core anesthesia conference for new CRNAs today, or SRNAs rather, who are going to be transitioning as CRNAs. And it starts with that sort of like number one rule when we were talking about down here of really understanding the landscape, I am, kind of benchmark how the anesthesia practice even makes money. We talk about the different practice models that are underneath uh those anesthesia practices and what are sort of like unique features about each type. So your solo practice versus your group practice, ownership, what that means in terms of for them, revenue stream, how they make money, financial risk, the administrative burden that they're having to face, revenue generation being direct versus a shared responsibility between groups, depending on the type of employer, and then like do they even have flexibility in what they can negotiate with you and in how they operate. And then the second page goes into like, okay, like what are those actual revenue streams? So when you're having a conversation with someone, let's say it's a plastic surgery place, and you're asking them like, okay, like how do you make money? Do you also charge a facility fee for you to be able to have that conversation about like, okay, like what is that fee and how much of it do I think should be coming to me, given the fact that you can't do surgery without anesthesia? The different billing models that your hospital may be going through. So, like if you're trying to negotiate a higher salary at your not-for-profit hospital, or your a hospital that does a value-based model where they're not going to be able to bill for a huge volume of surgical cases to be able to make ends meet, does it seem maybe a little bit ridiculous that you expect to be making the same as a CRNA that's across across town, and they're in a private surgery center and they're getting paid this much because that's a whole different billing model at that different organization? What their payer mix does to how they're able to bring in money. What are the economic conditions? Do they have a high patient volume? If you're going home at 11 o'clock every day, but you want to, make the same as you would be at a place where they're sending you home at 3 because you gave them 8 hours, does that actually make any mathematical sense? Like, let's kind of dive into that a little bit and understand that a little bit. And then we go into negotiation skills, how to research salary data with some of the tools that I've provided. How do you analyze a job posting? How do you, network with colleagues to have mentorship to get people to help guide you in this process? And then we go into the negotiation tips. So if anybody's, interested in this, I'm happy to share as well. Yeah, and that's that.
All right. So let's kind of stop this recording here.